When middle school hit, I began getting all the talks you dread to have the most with adults. Talks about sex, puberty, and most of all, drug use. As a tween growing up in the 2000s, I was caught at a turning point in American drug history. The decades-long war on drugs, kicked off by President Nixon's administration in 1971, was coming to an end. During this time, drug users and addicts were painted as the enemy of a pure American lifestyle. In its place, people were becoming more open about their casual drug use, even presidents. Addiction began being referred to as a medical epidemic that affected all of American society instead of bad behavior that affected only disparaged minority groups. Today, we're going to push through changing thoughts and opinions on drug abuse in America and get to the heart of the issue. What is the science behind drug addiction? The brain is the supercomputer of the human body. It is made up of many systems that interact with each other to help your body function properly. Networks of neurons send signals to the rest of your body. Think of neurons as tiny cell towers, sending out information and receiving information from different parts of the body. Drugs disrupt this messaging system. They can be used to correct faulty signaling by either suppressing or increasing the signals being sent. Most addictive substances target the brain's reward circuit in this part, the basal ganglia. This part of the brain lets us experience pleasure. When we do pleasurable activities like eating our favorite foods or talking to friends, our neurons release waves of endorphins and dopamine into our body. These are the chemicals responsible for us feeling happy and motivated to repeat pleasurable behaviors. Endorphins are often called the happy chemicals, while dopamine is called the drive chemical. Addictive substances produce large surges in the release of these chemicals. This tells the brain, hey, that felt good, you should do that again. The brain remembers and will crave the drug. Drug abuse is often described like a radio that is turned up too loud. In order to deal with the overstimulation of chemicals from regular drug use, the brain lowers how effective its reward circuit is. The brain begins to depend on the substance in order for the reward circuit to function at all. Getting pleasure from other activities becomes more difficult. Now the brain is dependent on drugs to feel joy. With a lower functioning reward circuit, a person will need to take more and more of the substance in order to get the same pleasure they felt the first time they took it. This effect is called tolerance. Substance addiction has many harmful side effects, including lowered decision-making and judgment capabilities, behavioral issues, decreased memory, depression, and anxiety. As seen in this brain scan, people addicted to cocaine have lower levels of brain metabolism, represented by the yellow region, in the part of the brain that controls judgment, decision-making, and emotion. Plenty of people take and use drugs, so who can become addicted? The truth is, anyone, no matter your age, race, or gender, can suffer from addiction. Research is still inconclusive, but scientists believe some people's environment or family history may put them at a higher risk for addiction. Addiction is not easy to heal from. There is a misconception that willpower alone is enough to overcome addiction. But addiction is not the same as trying to stick to a diet. It's not like resisting ice cream. It's more like cutting ice cream out of your life, but your body depends on ice cream to function, and now you must eat ice cream to feel capable of getting through a day. Despite the fact that anyone can become addicted, addiction is a very stigmatized topic. This stigma has been spread by the zero-tolerance policies of the war on drugs in the 1970s through the 1990s put into place by Presidents Nixon, Reagan, and Clinton. Harsh drug policies have led to criminal sentences that unequally affect people of color in the U.S. In an interview with Harper's Magazine, a former Nixon aide admitted that the aim of the war on drugs was not to diminish drug addiction in America, but to vilify political enemies. He is quoted as saying the Nixon White House had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we disrupted those communities. This type of injustice has not disappeared. According to the Drug Policy Alliance and the Yale Law Journal, prosecutors are twice as likely to pursue a minimum sentence for black people as for white people charged with the same offense. Since 1980, the daily number of people arrested for drug law violations has increased tenfold. Today, 500,000 people are arrested every day on drug charges. In the past 10 years, we have seen a change in the way addiction is talked about, as public servants have begun to call attention to the opioid epidemic. The number of people dying from overdoses of not only illicit drugs like cocaine, but also prescription opioids, more commonly known as painkillers, has doubled since 1999. And according to the National Institute of Health, in 2017, 19,354 Americans died from an overdose of prescription pain relievers that had been approved by a physician. 72,000 total overdose-related deaths were reported for 2017. And currently, 115 people a day die from an overdose. Though frightening, these statistics have rallied the public to take action to lower overdose and addiction rates. The Department of Health and Human Services has declared opioid addiction a public health emergency. Addiction is finally beginning to be recognized as a medical public health problem that can affect all members of society. Increasingly, American people are advertising for drug decriminalization, education, and increased access to rehabilitation programs. However, some argue that stronger penalties for drug charges and stricter regulations on physicians are needed to lower rates of drug abuse and distribution. Policy reformers have run into difficulty in figuring out a way for prescription drugs to be regulated while ensuring people have access to the medication they need. And in lower-class areas where overdose rates are disproportionately high, prioritizing funding for addiction rehabilitation can be a difficult decision for politicians to make. Addiction is a deadly and growing epidemic that affects millions of Americans. Fighting the stigma surrounding addiction and finding effective solutions will not be easy. But the conversation is now finally out of the shadows and in public light, and it is up to the public, politicians, voters, medical professionals, or passionate citizens to work together to bring their care to those in need.